Good evening, everybody. I am not starting on time, but sorry, I just saw somebody's Discord message. So I gotta respond to this. All right. So again, still working out schedules. It will not surprise you to find out that I was coming home from work. Um, it's quite cold as well. So what have we got here? But I will survive, and we will enjoy. We'll enjoy some Book of Hours. I'm just trying to bring up the. I'm trying to find the Advent calendar. Sorry, I should say I'm actually feeling a little sore from the fall earlier this week, so uh, I'm trying not to be a big whiner about it, but occasionally I just need to scooch around and find a little bit more comfortable of a position. Okay, so here we go. Let's go through the mega list here. So Sunday the 1st, Christmas decorations. These appear in several places in Hush House, as well as across Brankrug Village. Also, Reverend Timothy's Christmas tree appears. Monday the 2nd, something smooth as an egg and frosted like a winter window, collected from Reverend Timothy's Christmas tree. Tuesday the 3rd, now this will have passed, but just to give you guys an idea about what is available and why you'll probably want to check this out pretty regularly. On the 3rd, there was 50% off the Notebook of the Hours, both in single and bundle form. And I think they're very beautiful notebooks. They're a little pricey for notebooks. Like this is a case where, and like I first of all, there's one thing I want to be kind of clear about for this. I am obviously in a better financial position than I was, I don't know, like even when I started streaming, to be completely honest with you, right? Like I have a real job now. I'm generating income. But like any job, it does not provide you like an infinite stream of revenue. You still want to be choosy about what you're doing. But there's I'm trying to remember where this quote comes from, but I remember it's quoted in Civilization 6, right? There are plenty of perfectly honest people who will not feel like they've gotten a bargain until they've cheated a merchant. And especially in the context of games, this is really true, right? There are some people who won't consider a game unless it's in the single digits, or if you're you won't buy it unless you see like an 80% off or something like that. Like, and the fact of excuse me, the fact of the matter is, not every single one of these things are commodities. Not every one of these things are appropriate to sort of price at such a low price. So in this case here, like for me, I really do think these are wonderful journals. The only thing is that they're A5, and they're somewhat thin compared to what you might find in sort of a bookstore. And I love them. Like I'm using them. I sometimes when I get things like this, I'm reluctant to write in them just because they're special. But journals are meant to be written in. So I took the Wheel of Fortune one, the green one, and I'm using it to go through some investing notes that I have. So I have David Leuenberger's Investment Science, and I'm using that for the notes. And I'll move on. I have a kind of a small collection of different either financial econometric or investment or just sort of related books that I'll use for it. It felt appropriate, and I'll find uses for The Hermit and The Magician. So all of that is to say, right, I just want to give an idea. I understand there's a very wide range of incomes inside of the stream. There are some people who will look at that and cannot imagine spending that money on notebooks of that size. And I know a lot of you are probably going to really want to see that. So And then for some of you, that's going to be a marginal purchase, right? One where maybe if there's a deal that goes on, you might pick it up or not. So on the 3rd, those went half off. And if you're looking for opportunities like that, definitely keep on top of the Christmas market. And I realize that I do not have my browser open, so none of you saw what I was looking at. Wednesday the 4th, in-game, something fiendishly simple and wretchedly fragile, collected from Reverend Timothy's Christmas tree. Thursday the 5th, Real World announcing a live AMA with Alexis and Lottie on Friday, the 13th of December, on the Weather Factory subreddit. Something may arrive. And Friday the 6th, in-game, something hard for mortal men to dig, collected from Reverend Timothy's Christmas tree. So, it's all good stuff. We are going to open up the game. I may step away for a little bit. I didn't need to go to the bathroom when I started, but I'm feeling a mild pressure. And it wouldn't hurt to get some tea, but I know I'm starting late, and I definitely feel the rush to get the game going. So I hope you all are looking forward to a nice weekend. I think I know what I want to do with it. Obviously, I have some videos to record and such. Indeed. Especially, sorry, as soon as I saw Vanguard on the list, I was like, good stream, everybody. Let's hit it hard tomorrow. Anyways, I hope you're doing well. I believe we are still on the same patch for Christmas. Sorry, just getting my notes up here. All right. Welcome back, Librarian. Everything is remembered. Hush House endures. Game loaded successfully. We've got our very, very crowded bridge. We are enjoying rest and refreshment in spring. No promises that we will get to Reverend Timothy's tree on tonight's stream. Obviously, we're just starting spring, and I think it only takes about 6 minutes in game to go through a season, if you speed it up, of course. But clearly, that is not the pace that I play this game in. I'm not going to deliberately wait it out for, just for the sake of the wait, but I also don't want to, I don't want to just sort of stay idle on a particular stream either. Oh, actually, Vanguard Master, I'll just say, so for those of you who don't know, Vanguard Master is a game developer, has put, I believe, 1.0 of their first standalone game. I know they were a developer of a Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord mod. But I saw an AMA with a VP from Unity, which I thought was kind of interesting. All right, I feel like I knew that, and I have congratulated you before for it. But congratulations, and I wanted to double check anyway. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. There were a few things. So one thing, I obviously am somewhat invested in the whole. The pricing change that they did, because I thought that the reaction to that was really overblown and unfair to Unity. Now, clearly I am the minority in that feeling, but they actually pointed out, they actually made an even stronger case on it than I necessarily would. But on top of that, it's not just the financing side. They do actually have some views in terms of sort of the future of the engine and what the shape of the industry is basically going to be over a 10-year time horizon that I thought was sort of interesting. So I don't know, if you want, I'm happy to link you the AMA, but as I say, I know you're an Unreal developer, so I don't know if that's something that you are you're kind of locked into. His view actually was that he felt that it was a mistake for Unity to try and pursue the AAA market for the simple reason that there aren't enough seats to really make it worthwhile. It's a very demanding consumer base, and it was working perfectly well for basically the micro game up to, you know, the large one. And of course, like once you get to the Unreal scale one, where like you want access to the source code and things like that, you know, you have a team of hundreds of artists and just access to stuff that you can't normally use. So I thought he actually made a fairly good point on that one. Clearly the engine is not the major consideration, right? Like you need the tools to make a game, and people will have strong views as to, you know, what the best path for that is. But I definitely found the perspective pretty interesting. So cool. I'll dig up the AMA and share it with you after the stream. Okay, so for today's work, we're going to want to do a Salon. Now, I think what I might do is I'm going to see if I can push this out a little bit later. I don't want it to be sundown, but I feel like we can try something... I feel like we can try something a little bit closer to the end of the day, and I just want to see if I get an extra memory off of that. Now, it does invite the question as to whether or not I want to try and read any of these other special books. I'm less inclined to do so for the simple reason that I don't know what lessons I'm going to get from the Salon. So, you know, I may change my plans in terms of what I try to upgrade. The thing is, though, that it's spring, right? It's the very beginning of spring. There's almost nothing for me to do here. So, you know, I'm not gonna get too bent out of shape in terms of how the day plans out. Also, because we have the Shrine to Saint Tentretto open, I am going to want to read specific texts. Now, I'm not going to rush those. That's going to be something that happens over time. But I do want to make sure that I have... I do kind of want to make sure that I have a plan for working with that. Oop, where are we? Okay, Deaths and Their Evasions. Father Stanislav John Schaller writes of the means and limitation of passage between the orders of the Mansus. No long names ours. Unusually, Father John has written this book in Fusine, for, he says, a special secrecy. Jenny, I keep wanting to raid you after your Book of Hours Fridays. My stream times keep missing. You know, I actually saw that you were streaming when I got started, and I actually really appreciate that. I'm going to take a minute here and shout you out. This is on me. So this probably will not necessarily be old news to you. But the deal is that in January I started a new job. And I really like this job, but it's added an hour commute for me. And then on top of that, because of the hour commute, there's a couple of other responsibilities that I have, and just, you know, doing little things like, you know, getting dinner and all of that. It adds up. So the time I actually want to start stream, and I used to start stream at, was 7 p.m. But clearly here, I'm starting, you know, 2 hours past what I normally would. And I will admit, sometimes that's just me, you know, staying later at work, because I really do like the work that I do. But it does make, and yeah, I'll just, in fairness to my workplace too, the hour is also adding in a little bit of drift, because the trains and things like that are not always reliable. But it is something I'm kind of conscious of. There's two things that I think about for this. So number one, I never want to take viewers for granted. And I know an inconsistent start time is something that is really hard for people to work with. But I also kind of recognize I also miss out on opportunities. You obviously have, you know, a large and wonderful audience, and it would be wonderful to have, you know, people who are into Book of Hours, to give them something to be able to check out after you. And if nothing else, I'd actually like to be able to hang out in your channel. Obviously, if I'm rushing home while you're finishing up your stream, that doesn't really make for me being a good community member. So I really appreciate that, and I actually also really appreciate the fact that you've continued to stream Book of Hours, because I do see you doing it quite regularly, which is why some of you will notice there's a shout out. I, unfortunately, have gotten to know Estienne much more as a chatter rather than a streamer, although I have visited the channel. And definitely, I will say, if nothing else, the Book of Hours is a big reason to go there. And in fact, particularly because if you are accustomed to me streaming at a certain time, happen to know that they'll be available at those times. But in any case, definitely somebody who I'm happy to see inside of chat. Definitely somebody who I want to talk up, if nothing else, just because I think it's nice when games like Book of Hours have a community around them to support the streamers. I don't know. I've always liked, I definitely can remember a couple of times when I've had games where I was maybe on the margin about, like, I enjoyed playing them maybe on my own time, but I wasn't sure if I'd do it on Twitch. Sometimes getting a nice host is like, or, having cool people show up. To me, that does make the difference. And so it's one of these things where, sure, you'll do your own thing. But if you can create an environment in which people feel welcome to stream, to be able to give that support and to show that support one way or another, I think it does mean that games that we enjoy get a little bit of an edge when it comes to those people deciding on what to stream. So it's not a work of charity; it's a work of self-interest for all of you. But please do check out SGNE's stream, not just for the Book of Hours, but the Book of Hours is a really wonderful place to start. All right, he speaks very cautiously of the exceptions that can sometimes be made to the edicts of Chancel and Calyptra, and hints at the means by which he successfully returned a lantern long to flesh. Schaller mentions most cautiously of all that he has been permitted to see a book that speaks more deeply on the matter, but that it was surrendered into the shadow... I just lost my screen. The shadow of a covenant stone of the Watchman's Tree. It can be retrieved if the 99th wink is reserved under the edict's liminal. And of course, we have solved that one before. Now, I'm wondering why I wanted to get the stolen secret. It's good for 2 Moon. But it's not clear to me what I'm trying to get with that moon. Oh, yes, I remember why. I wanted to verify that it was a stolen secret so I can shelve it. Ragged Crossroads is Moon? Or no, sorry, it's not Moon. It's Edge and Winter. I was thinking of Snow Stories. But yeah, no, this was just... at the end of last stream, I'd forgotten to shelve Deaths and Their Evasions, and I wanted to verify that it was. All right. Again, I'm trying to figure out. I think it may be that you get the extra memory if you or the extra event if you host it in one of the rooms. But I want to see if I can do a later picnic, and if nothing else, I'll also find the limits for the picnic. So it's going to be a little bit of a wait here. Now, in terms of future texts, so in terms of ones that I can read, better now. I think I've got another. Yeah. The thing is, I'm not going to restore this Whist for the simple reason that, actually, you know what I can do? I can just use this back and forth because there's no situation where I need more than 6 of any one of these. I was always wondering if you guys can see. Sometimes they block these ones, so I'm sorry, but for those of you looking for the deal of a lifetime, the window is closed. At least this time Twitch isn't saying like, hey, you've got a very active chat. Do you want to clip this moment? I'm like, no, I'm not screaming, Mom, get the camera. There are people in my chat. This place is lots of chat. It's like it's IRC with like a Canadian accent in the background. Anyway, sorry, what was I saying? Oh yeah, I was going to go over the potential. Yeah, I'm too low tech for this stuff. So out of the books that I have that I haven't read yet, we have In Memory of Gods. We have Each Flame is Fuel. A Manual for Departure. I think what I'll do just as a precaution, call this temp. Secret Colors, Enchiridion Triangularis. I don't know if I've read this one or not. Book of True Blood. We've definitely read this one. Descent of the Shell, History of Inks, Isaac of Karth's History of the Shadowless Kings, The Book of the Extinguished Heart, The Messenger Awaiting Her Destination, The Songs of the Carapace Cross, another one which I think I've read before, but I can't recall on its own which one I've read or not. The Book of the White Cat, Origins of the Hours, The Focus of Amber, The Sevenfold Slaying of the Seven Coiled, Nyx Abalix, Voyages of Furnish and of Oriel, The Road to Janus, or Janus in some cases, The Carmine Petal, Unexpurgated, and The Wound Wounds, or possibly The Wound Wounds, or The Wound Wounds, or The Wound Wounds. It's Wound Wounds. But the other books that I want to account for are the audio, like the phonographs. So I believe we've read all of these, but we do have A Tower Falls and A Tower Rises, both of them preliminal meter ones. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. So what I enjoyed was in the beta, the original text for the Wound Wounds was not homophones. So it could, I mean, technically it does not indicate which one should be, it doesn't indicate which one should be the different word, or different sounding word, but I call it the Wound Wounds. Okay, I'm going to try and see if we can push to afternoon on this one. We can make it part of the AMA. My go-to AMA question is always, what is the most exciting feature that you haven't announced yet? But I think I need original material now. I think I have kind of like 3 big ones I'd like to do for the AMA, but I'm never sure if there's a cap, so I try to do one for each member of the team, and then if there's an opportunity to do more. Zarog, how are you doing? Always good to see you. And I actually I think, is that one of Pro's? It is one of Pro's. Very nice. Good to see you as always, and nice emote choices. You can ask an extra one on behalf since I don't have a Reddit account. SGNE asks, is it possible to lower the difficulty? There's a specific art. What you really need to do is the best delivery of that line is you got to be in a certain channel. You declare it International Nap Day. Everybody go to bed. That sounds so good, Zerogdri, but I feel I owe it to my public to keep streaming. I may, however, after the salon, grab some tea for myself because it's cold. My hands are actually still a little bit numb, but we are going to talk about the feast that we are going to enjoy in the garden. So we're in the Physic Garden. The nuns of the Knot planted this garden of healing herbs in the dawn period. Natan of Regensburg and Gideon de Wolf both expanded it, and the Curia of the Isle tended it. Even the branch and the bureau made use of it in the grim days that Brandkrug served as a prison. So we will enjoy pickled mackerel. Pickling is a kind of afterlife. What comes after afterlife? We also have Pilchards on Toast, triply crunchy. We'll be enjoying a game pie, pheasant or snipe or woodcock or rabbit, and tasty pastry. And game chips. Long before fish and chips, these went crunchily with game. Ideally, you'd want bread sauce and bread crumbs to complete the ensemble, but honestly, it's hard enough not to just stuff these directly into your mouth. And finally, for pudding, orange jumble. They should be the size of teacup rims and should curl their crisp edges, faintly pink as the underneath of a young mushroom. Lady Jekyll, Kitchen Essays. Our guests will be enjoying a cup of so I wanted specifically to go for a non-alcoholic salon, even though it's only Ibn al-Adim that has the restriction against alcohol. So here we have the Don Lion coffee from beyond the Great Deserts. We have Caterin Hero Second Flush Assam, a tea from the land of the real unicorn, imported by Caterin Hero. And Solomon's preparation. Solomon Husher would take this every night without fail before sleep to close his ears to the sound of the waves. But on the 9th of January 1838, the Agonalia of Janus, a heavy snow fell on Hush House. When the other residents dug themselves out, Husher was nowhere to be found. He had left a resignation letter and an undrunk measure of his preparation. You haven't done any pickling yet. You should experiment more with cooking since you're sure there's a few. I actually suspect there are more recipes than I've discovered, but I've found sort of the low-hanging fruit for myself. But there is something fun. Like, so I'm at the point where I really enjoy putting together the salon and deciding like what I want to sort of pair and who I'm inviting and such. So I've got enough I think on my spreadsheet I can't say that they are unique food items, but I have 83 different entries, keeping in mind that some of these are multiple. So, for instance, pickled mackerel serves both as a starter and as a side. So, if you fulfill more than one role, you're going to appear twice in the table. But still, that's a fair number, even with duplicates. That's quite a few items. Speaking of, you had a fun throwback salon where you invited all the characters. Oh, that's a good idea. That I definitely want to do that. I can't do that with Connie now, sadly, but I can definitely bring back some of the old figures. Now, here's a question for you: does Fraser Strathcoyne count as a throwback character or not? Because you never actually see him; you just rob him. So I guess you would have Connie Lee, Connie Lee, Ibn al-Adim, Douglas Moore. Zachary Wakefield. Okay, cool. Well, I mean, there's nothing saying that it has to be like you don't have to fill every slot. It's just nice to do. And Olympie Bichet, of course. That's a really neat idea, actually. I wonder if there's dialogue that sort of supports the fact that they're all from the original game. All right, so, and who will be enjoying this fine feast? We've got D.I. Douglas Moore, Detective Illuminate of the Suppression Bureau, a stoic but weary fellow. His dearest wish is to move to Chingford and grow roses, but the buggers won't let him retire. I will just mention as well, one of the things I really like, for those of you who do not know, because I don't know if everybody realizes this, in Cultist Simulator, it is actually possible to recruit some of the hunters who come after you. And if you do this to the Weary Detective, the Weary Detective does join your cult. Well, actually, okay. So the Weary Detective can join your cult, also can show up as a rival. But basically, if you decide to go down that path, you learn that the Weary Detective's name is Douglas. He ceases to be the Weary Detective and becomes Douglas. And it was in Book of Hours that it's revealed his last name is Moore. But what I like is that if you have played Cultist Simulator and you know who D.I. Douglas Moore is, you get to talk a conversation with a very tired detective. So the others, Fraser Strathcoyne, the Alapine, Dagmar, and Dr. Peel. I also think some of the early text for the Douglas Moore was just, so tired, so weary, or something like that. I should find some of the old text. The one actually that I miss the most, so the only one that I feel a little sad has changed in the main game, is Scrumpy is now the West Country's most unregenerate achievement, perhaps at its best when pressed from stolen apples. And the original text for Scrumpy was, now this is apples. So I actually like the original quite a bit. This is a wonderful description, and I think it's more consistent with the tone. But it's really hard for me not to like that original text. All right. So a picnic in the Physic Garden, the peace of flowers, the murmur of leaves. Here one might have a picnic, but only in spring or summer. Picnics must take place before dusk in spring or summer with at least 2 guests. The more guests, the more successful the salon, but you'll need enough food and drink in the room for everyone. Okay, so I was worried that this might happen. One does not picnic when it's too dark to apply jam without the peril of jam-related accidents. So I do apologize. I know we waited for some of this, but I do actually want to do the salon today, and I wasn't 100% sure when the cutoff was. So, we're inviting D.I. Douglas Moore, Detective Illuminate of the Suppression Bureau, a stoic but weary fellow. His dearest wish is to move to Chingford and grow roses, but the buggers won't let him retire. Mr. Fraser Strathcoyne, philanthropist, collector, former librarian, a complicated man, but not a cruel one. Dr. Ibn al-Adim, the Alapine, historian, doctor, and above all, traveler. The good doctor has been associated with all but one of the libraries of the Watchman's Tree. He was secretary nunciant of Hush House for a little while, but he has never been on good terms with the Suppression Bureau. Damer, Grafen Friederike Dagmar Sophia Teresa Helena Begina von Nagelsberg, if you prefer. She doesn't. And Dr. Aaron Peel, exile, riddlemonger, thunderskin devotee, I'd rather say confidant, impeccably dressed but always in dark clothing so the stains don't show. Dark the dressings too at his ankles and wrists. I won't take a seat. It's kind of you to offer. It would be unkind of me to accept. You think you may have run out of conversation topics between some people. I got a generic, this is a conversation about skill message during a salon, which is interesting. I'm not sure if it was random or was actually no further available interactions. That would be interesting. I'm sure there's a way, so I'm sure you know, actually if you don't and you're curious, I'm happy to maybe off-stream talk about how you can look at the sort of the files for the game, if you'd like. But, so there are ways to actually determine that, but I've always kind of considered it to be, I usually don't like to go into the game's files unless I have some sort of intermediate layer that stops me from looking at everything. So if I do data analysis, I can load it into a table and I don't need to directly look at the table. I just sort of need that metadata in terms of where, what the column names are and such to get the information that I need. Because in that case, usually I'm looking for a count of something, right? I'm translating all of this prose into a number. Or, I like to, I don't mind going through the files if I've got the game and I don't, if I've beaten the game and I don't have any lingering puzzles. So for instance, there was in the house, there was one of the treasures of the house that I didn't quite figure out. It's the one that I feel I'm reasonably safe to put it this way. It's the one that I learned from looking at one of these 2 items. And I figured the people who know will know, and the people who don't are no closer to solving that particular one than before. So I was pretty reluctant to take a look at any of the files about sort of the treasures of the house or the rooms or the things that might contain that sort of information. So, of course, now that House of Light is out, I definitely don't want to be mucking around on the internals of the game for fear of sort of seeing, the, in my opinion, at least with the books that I got on my first playthrough, it's one I didn't get on my first playthrough, and I think is easy for people to miss. then again, I mean, I'm always kind of surprised by what people find. And I mean, like, I get that some people are just going to look at the wiki, and I'm sure there's going to be some subset of people who claim that they found it and they consulted the wiki, and who cares, right? Like, you don't get to keep the Spintria at the end of the playthrough. But yeah, for me, it was one that had eluded me, and I definitely had a feeling that something should be there. There were definitely a couple of signals for me, but I really don't like brute forcing through a whole bunch of different combinations. I really do try to sort of figure it out. Yeah, exactly, right? I'm like, I don't actually see there being a big problem of, you know, if you get something out of this game by looking at the wiki, that's fine. I don't, right? I actually really enjoy working this stuff out because it gives me a little bit of I mean, if nothing else, you get an interesting view on sort of how Weather Factory looks at this world, right? And I mean, with that in mind, there's always the possibility that there's something that I'm not aware of. Certainly, this one I feel is okay, but there's one that I'd figured, but for a very long time, I never found this one. Obviously, we already used what was inside here. So I knew that there were little extra surprises, but I didn't always. Yeah, well, that's just it. I never want it to be. That was the last secret you found. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think the one that had the journal in it was the one that I found last. It was certainly the most exciting out of them, but I'm pretty sure I was looking for the Black Dove wine, which is how I found that first one. But yeah, no, I never want to I never want to look down my nose at people who consult the wiki. It's really the only issue I have with the wiki is that when people do that and then come in like some sort of expert, you know, oh, well, what you just need to go do this thing. Is like, okay, thanks. Like, you know, should I just pause the game and ask chat each time there's another action to do? Like, that's the thing that drives me insane. But I'm noticing, at least for Cultist Simulator and Book of Hours, people are pretty good about respecting the boundaries on that. Not always, but I mean, you can't. I'd prefer that to some of the experiences I've had with other games that I really like. Like Off-World Trading Company is a game I love, and I'm very reluctant to actually play that again on stream just because of the way people were inside the chat. So, but yeah, but yeah, it's one of these things where part of my enjoyment out of it is just to kind of get a particular view of the world, and so that's one of the reasons why I like kicking around with it. But I always feel like I need to be really clear in terms of why I like highlighting that and it being a personal thing as opposed to, you know, just being like, LOL, this game is for smart people, or making people feel bad because they're consulting help. Yeah, I mean, I found with Outer Wilds there were a couple of people who tried to be clever about it and like ask leading questions, and those people actually annoy me a little bit more because it's very transparent what they're doing. Like, I don't think it would fool a dog, frankly. Um, so it's backseating and then insulting my intelligence at the same time. But you're right. No, I think most people understand that a lot of the joy of that game is actually figuring it out. I mean, especially a game that infinitely resets. I'm trying to remember. I did a search once because somebody was asking how long does it take you to get through like Outer Wilds or something like that. And I searched on Google. It's like, how long does it take to beat Outer Wilds? And I think it said like, you know, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. I'm like, okay, yes, technically correct and very funny, but not what I was looking for. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, that was a real joy. I should try the DLC at some point. But anyway, sorry, I've been teasing you all with a picnic, and yeah, I mean, I've always sort of felt that, so everybody's going to have their own view in these things. Like I've not necessarily felt I don't actually feel that bad about spoilers. Like, I had somebody come in when I was playing L.A. Noire, and somebody sort of says what the fate of the main character is, and I'm like, I'm completely indifferent about it because I know absolutely nothing about the journey it takes him to get there, right? Like, this is a complete fail to make me go, oh god, now I can't play this game. Obviously, I was annoyed with the guy because it was disrespectful, and it was an effort to try and ruin that for me. But, like, a spoiler in and of itself tends to be something that really provokes a lot of people's extreme reactions without really having that big of a weight on the experience itself. But that does become different when you're playing a game and trying to figure something out and someone solves it for you. Obviously, that can be a drag because it really is hard. Like, it really does deny you the opportunity to do that yourself. And so for me, I've always sort of found, get a read on the situation, and there will be some time. I mean, I've had a situation where I've mistaken a rhetorical question for a real one because it did, like, there was definitely a tone there which sounded different from the other broadcaster. I think I'd asked, were you looking for advice, and was like, no, I never want advice, and so on. I was like, okay, nope, fair. Like, I get annoyed by that too. So I totally get that the mistakes can happen on that, but it's always one of those ones that I feel a little more cautious about for the simple reason that it's the bell you can't unring, right? But again, everybody's kind of got their own style. I've always tended to find it's best when just to figure out what world you're in before talking. But like I said, I've been teasing you all with a picnic. We're going to do it, and we're specifically going to see if Dr. Aaron Peel has been sketched as standing up because he said he wouldn't sit. Ah! My immersion. Mansa's Tales. Ask about dreams. Add a FET card. That's my guess. I'm going to have to send an all capital letters message to Weather Factory support. Halt game 3. You're going to need to realize a standing Peel. Aaron is concerned about the progress of a recent candidate for Lantern Longhood. He shares names and details with Douglas. Knife, noose, flame, word. I don't like it, but I don't like this aspirant either. Conversation ebbs and flows. Oh, Aaron shared details of a long in the making with Douglas. The two might say something else on the matter if you invite them both back for another salon. So there was another encounter like this that I forgot to write down, so I'm happy I've got another one of these. So we're definitely going to be inviting Douglas and Aaron back. Instinct and emotion. Add a tryst card. Fraser complains to Douglas about Sorry. Fraser complains to Douglas about break-ins. Douglas unsympathetically suggests that Fraser might want to keep less contraband on the premises then. That is a very good interaction. Actually, I should say, for those of you not familiar with it, this is the second time I'm referring to a little bit of inside baseball on Cultist Simulator. So, in addition to Douglas Moore, the weary detective showing up in Hush House, Fraser Strathcoyne is somebody who technically, I'll be careful because Estienne has his sort of Cultist Simulator alumni salon. So You never meet Fraser Strathcoin. However, there is a vault in the capital. It's like one of the first vaults that you go to, called Strathcoin's Residence. And in fact, in the prototype for Cultist Simulator, this is the thing that I played way back. That might even have been before the Horizon signal for Stellaris. Definitely something that I played off of itch. I actually used to have a copy of it, and then I think I got a new processor, and as part of it, I reformatted the hard drive, not realizing that the Cultist Simulator prototype was on it. Because I know Weather Factory doesn't have it. They have an Android version of that prototype, but they don't actually have the original prototype, which used to be on itch. So I was a little sad that I lost that. But anyway, the Geminiad was a text that you would get from Strathcoin's Residence. Fusine was not implemented in the game. Braggy3030, thank you very much for the follow. Fusine wasn't implemented in the game, so it was just sort of this occult text that you would get. And that was sort of like I don't even think there was an ending to the game. I think you just sort of would go around and do things, and that would it was sort of like, hey, this thing's working, basically. But yeah, anyways, so Strathcoin's Residence is one of the vaults in the capital, and in order to get, I think you still get the Geminiad from it, but basically you burgle Strathcoin's house, and then there's sort of a follow-up that says, the house, you read in the paper that there's a fire at the house. Did somebody knock over a coal, or was it deliberately burned down, to avoid any suspicion of something or something like that. So this is a little bit of a throwback to Cultist Simulator, just sort of saying, it's like, why do people keep robbing my house? And apparently the worried detective is absolutely having none of it. That is a very cute little interaction. What's next? Conversation ebbs and flows. Say something witty. Add a Shapt card. See, this is how you know it's a role-playing game. It finally lets me be witty for once. I think I could get away with using a whist now, so... I don't want to throw away all my elements of the soul, but clearly we're near the end of the day, and we only have 3 more encounters. Aaron and Dagmar greet each other with delight and are soon engaged in another round of their perennial riddle game. What is the difference, Aaron asks, between a twin? Dagmar roars happily. One of its names is both the same. We're going to have to unpack that one. Lively chatter. Inject a little gaiety. Add a core card. Obviously, names was capitalized, so... Douglas and Aladim are trying to work out whether the unusual nature of Aladim's ascension to longhood under the Vagabond actually means he hasn't broken any British laws. They decide he probably has, but Douglas is very practical about the difficulties of arresting him and offers to let him off with a caution if he doesn't ever ascend to immortality again. That's a reveal. I guess there isn't a mortal flag in this one. Raise a complex question. Aladim and Fraser are debating, very cautiously, even here in Hush House, the nature of the red flower of Calyptra, to what extent it makes use of the cleansing fire, and to what extent it relies on illusion and deception. Lesson Inks of Power. I am curious about this association between Inks of Power and the red flower. An afternoon spent profitably, reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers to the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. lively picnic concludes. My guests leave happy. You've gained an additional potent memory, which will probably replace something inside here, but what are we going to do, right? Yeah, so like when I'm trying to think about it like red, white, and black. So if Inks of Power is associated with red, having joyfully crossed over the 2-year threshold, dancing in the name of the Thunderskin. Lovely to see you, Takri. I hope you're doing well. I don't know what the temperature is like where you are. I think we're getting to negative double digits now. And of course, this is Canada, so we use Celsius. But it's always very nice to see that resub message from you. And of course, hello to you as well, Algrins. I hope you both are doing well. But yeah, so this is one that I have a little difficulty parsing out. Like, I do find it interesting to see the connection between Inks of Power and the Red Flower. But it does invite the question to me as to what the next two would be. So, of course, we have Inks of Containment, which you would think would probably be most closely associated with white because of the moon in the winter. The descriptions here aren't entirely helpful. So here it says Inks of Power, the inks in which histories are written, Inks of Containment, the inks in which histories are preserved, and then Inks of Revelation, the ink in which histories are revealed. So the question would be, which one is the black? And it would be tough to say that, you know, the Inks of Revelation would be associated with black, which by process of elimination, if you go for the obvious white one, you need to say, well, how on earth does the black flower line up with Inks of Revelation? But perhaps it would be better for me to reflect on the flowers themselves, because the other thing too, if I had just gone from the text of Inks of Power, I would have said, well, you know, rose and scale doesn't immediately speak to me in terms of associating it with red. And of course, there is the cleansing fire of Calyptra. Well, I don't normally associate that with. I don't really associate that with writing. So it might be better for me to think a little bit more carefully about the other two flowers and make the determination from that. Anyway, definitely a fun little puzzle. This is one of the things that's really nice about the salons. I do always get a little bit more out of them. I sometimes wish they were a bit longer, but of course we have. It just gives us a reason to do more. Okay. A lively picnic concludes. Oh, actually, Takri, sorry. For those of you who saw this before, I think Takri might enjoy this because she found me originally through Cultist Simulator. So I wanted to share some of the things that happened during the salon. So we invited Daymare, Ibn Aladim, Fraser Strathcoyne, Aaron Peel, and Douglas Moore. So, Aaron and Dagmar greet each other. Oh, hang on. I don't think this is the first one. Anyways. Oh, no, it is. Sorry. Aaron and Dagmar greet each other with delight and are soon engaged in another round of their perennial riddle game. What is the difference, Aaron asks, between a twin? Dagmar roars happily. One of its names is both the same. Douglas and Aladim are trying to work out whether it's the unusual nature of Aladim's ascension to Longhood under the Vagabond actually means he hasn't broken any British laws. They decide that he probably has, but Douglas is very practical about the difficulties of arresting him and offers to let him off with a caution if he doesn't ever ascend to immortality again. Aladim and Fraser are debating very cautiously, even here in Hush House, the nature of the red flower of Calyptra, to what extent it makes use of the cleansing fire, and to what extent it relies on illusion and deception. And the one that unfortunately I'm missing out of this, this is the one that I wanted to share with you. So there was an interaction between D.I. Douglas Moore and Fraser Strathcoyne, where Fraser's complaining about the number of break-ins, and Douglas is basically, you know, we'll stop keeping all the contraband in your home, which I thought was a nice little callback to Cultist Simulator. All right, we got a wild surmise. Satisfaction. Inks of Power. Edicts Inviolable. Edicts Liminal. Wolf Stories. And Magaphine Mysteries. If it's Douglas, I'm sure he's just a little more weary. If it's Fraser, who knows? Okay, so I want to take some time to work out how I'm going to use these lessons. I don't need to be stingy with the books, but it's nice to make the most of what I have available to me. So for the next one, so Edicts Inviolable needs to get to level 9. And I can actually do that with Magaphine Mysteries. Or I could use it with Edicts Inviolable. Shocking. Rites of the Roots. I'll have to think about that one, because that one's, I believe, Nectar and Moth. Leaves and Thorns is the level that it needs to be. Enberry and Lapidary. We're actually heavy on the moon right now. I used to need a lot of moon. Purifications and Exaltations, unfortunately, doesn't work for any of these. And we did just already move up Horns and Ivories. But Pentiments and Precursors, we can use Inks of Power for that and the Wolf Stories. And Solutions and Separations is going to need a bit of love, so we'll work with that. In fact, the Satisfaction might get me... Yeah, okay. I'm getting some ideas now. So I guess the last question on this is what I do with the Magaphine Mysteries, but let's worry about that. Let's worry about that later. So I can level up Pentiments and Precursors without that much trouble. I'll use the Satisfaction. Now, it'd be nice if I could do something like use the Clouds or use the Storm, like the stuff that will be going away. But I can also just use the Earth Sign because I can read the book. So we'll do that now and just get one of my bits of homework out of the way. Okay, so Pentiments and Precursors, we'll throw an Arab at it. We will use Satisfaction, Earth Sign, and finally... I guess I was going to use both Inks of Power and Wolf Stories. That's fine. And then it just means that Magaphine Mysteries goes beside Ragged Crossroads. I'll need to figure out what I want to do with those, preferably before Numa. But I'll focus on leveling up the things that I need first. So I'm no expert, but I'm no dabbler either. So with that, we will read Durashu Quirkum. I have already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. And then finally, for good measure, we'll take a quick stroll by Crowcross Sands. And also walk on the moors. Clamber up the long reaches of the moors behind the village, lean into the wind's fluttering fist. If I know what to look for, I might find something among the rocks. And my usual go-to, actually, is Pentiments and Precursors, which is currently being used. Alright, the gorse is bright on the land's nape. So again, not a super busy day, but obviously the Salon was the real highlight. No mystery if I need the green jasper tablet or the rights to the roots, I suppose. But there'll be two sort of big priorities for the next little while. So one will be to get Edicts Inviolable in, work the wolf stories and so on and so forth. But the next priority, if I can, would be to open up the sealed vault. And I think probably Mrs. Kill is the easiest answer on this one, given that she already has the 2 Grail. But we'll see what options we have as the day goes by. All right, so for memories, I don't think I can take the Stolen Secret. Yeah, so we would go for the Storm again. Now that night has fallen, I can rest and perhaps dream on the day's doings. And an afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, would folks feel too hard done by if I took a small break to... I feel like I just lost a shilling. There we go. Would folks feel too hard done by if I took a small break to get some tea and stretch and otherwise get myself sorted out before we go on to the next stage? Just because I didn't get any of that done at the start and I would like to take care of myself. How dare I? I mean, it's only been an hour, right? So, but I do feel I can get a little more mileage out of the stream if I do that now. All right, thank you. So let's read De Reshu Quercum before we do that, though. In English, the title translates roughly as The Account of the Oaks, but this is Nathaniel Darcy Ever's fascinating, if haphazard, survey of the occult properties of every tree he can find, not just oaks. If you don't mind me pillaging Hush House while you're gone. Well, I think the weary detective is still around, so maybe he'll be, or maybe Fraser will just feel obligated. So you're taking a risk. Although I will point out on Twitter, I did suggest to Weather Factory that they allow for a DLC which lets you go in and rearrange other librarians' libraries without them knowing. So who knows? Maybe it's an extra feature after they do Game 3. In Persia, Taxis Peccata, the yew is called Sorkdar, which is the red tree. There they had long understood the Grail root. In later times, the great king of Pontus had beehives set in the branches of the oldest of the female trees. The berries of the Pontine yew open the door to death, but the honey of their flowers opens a different door entirely. This was not the great king's Mithridate, but one who has suckled at the great yew fears poison no longer. Perhaps they should. Nathaniel is here distracted, however, by the toxic properties of certain inks. He does mention more usefully that the minor ink of Power Ugal can be brewed through the rites of the roots with the assistance of the aspect nectar. Alright, now is a good time if you are looking to refresh your own beverage or otherwise take care of yourself. Get up, have a stretch, get a cup of tea, whatever is required. I'm going to try and keep it short, but I do know when I first boil the kettle, I don't have any water in it right now. It usually takes a little bit longer than I expect. I'm also going to try and stretch, and again, I'm sure it's like just a bruise or something like that, but I am actually still feeling a little from the... I should just specify too, like, I had my backpack on, so it's not just that I like fell on my back, but I sort of did that arching on something quite hard. So yeah, it just, when I can, it's nice to get a little bit of a stretch and try and make sure that I'm not in severe pain. I'm not in severe pain, but yeah, I am gonna just take a quick minute to march around the apartment and otherwise feel a little less cramped up. But for those of you that really want to stick around and watch the ads, your time has come. For the rest of you, I'll see you in a couple minutes. Okay, Zerog, I suspect probably what would have you not only would have been able to alphabetize, but you would have been able to reverse alphabetize and then do one other set of sorting in the time that break took. I apologize. I got the T's acquired, but yeah, that was longer than I was planning. So we will work out the rest of the night. We should already get our storm back, and we will work on getting Edicts Inviolable leveled up. And we'll also have a little bit of a think about how we can get Mrs. Kill to open up the sealed vault. Thunderclap Sasquatch, good to see you again. How you doing? Hey. Sorry, my tablet's shut off. There we go. Unexpected finds in the folds of earth and sky. So, Hawthorn Blank and Driftwood Fragment. Long ago, there was a forest between the waves of Brancrude Bay. This driftwood is not nearly that old, but it's shared salt with its lost forerunners. Okay, so the main point of today is definitely going to be lessons. But I do, like I said, I do want to see if I can get Mrs. Kill to open up a vault. I believe we needed 14 Grail. And then I want to see what it's going to take me to feeling the Grail? Oh, feeding the Grail a little. I thought you were saying you're feeling the Grail a little. But yeah, so we'll see what we can do to get to the 14 Grail. We'll see what we can do to get the lessons that I need. But if we bring in Mrs. Kill... So there's 2 Grail there. We can also bring in 5 Grail from Newman. So that already gives us 7. We can, of course, use Arab. So that'll bring us up to 9. And then we have the spice scales. So that gives us 10. So really at that point we need to find 4 Grail between either either food, and we're close. So the Witching to Sane will give me 2 Grail. The question is, do I have a Grail food that gives us what we need? Blackberry jam only gives me 1. Plum croutons are 2 heart. I'm gonna guess this is the toffee pudding. Okay, yeah, so toffee pudding would do it. The fudge? Fudge is 3 Grail. All the bad things doing a good thing. Oh, fair enough. So amusingly enough, I think there are actually more non-alcoholic Grail options in House of Light, or well, yeah, between House of Light and Book of Hours than there are non-alcoholic moth options. As far as I can tell, there is 1 non-alcoholic moth drink, but there are I believe at least 2 non-alcoholic Grail drinks. I'm not too optimistic about my chances for the 2 Grail. Yeah, well, okay, a baked pear meringue is not that hard for me to get back together again, so yeah, let's just, we'll do this the old-fashioned way. So let's prep for Mrs. Kill. So first of all, I'm going to want a replacement pear meringue. So let's get that together. And for that, I'm actually going to use spices and savors because I'm going to need to... and I haven't used my health a lot recently, so we'll use that there. So I'm going to use spices and savors rather than the kitchenware because I'm going to need to use the spice scales with Mrs. Kill. So there we go. Bake a pear meringue. A dish with forge, grail, moon, nectar, and winter. Okay, We also need to invite Mrs. Kill, so that's an easy decision to make. Speak with Mrs. Kill. Kill's mood always improves when I drop by. Mrs. Kill stands ready to help. You always cheer me up, she says morosely. And we will read the Sun's Division. Or, sorry, the Sun's... what is it called? Sun Disfigured. Alright, I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. Okay, so next task is going to be to work out the edicts inviolable. Now, I may have the option of making all this work with Mrs. Kill. You know, there's a few things that can be at play here. But I think the easiest thing for me to do right now is just read the books that will get me Heart and Moon and see where we're at there. So first up, we'll read the account of Kanishk at the Spider's Door. In addition to that, we'll head up here. We'll use the Shaft. I don't believe we have anything heavy on knock. So Beguiling Melodies works out here as well. Can't imagine why I want to read something about the twins right now. Moving on. So I think that's it for this little side of... Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting. So Cheerful Ditties. Hang on. Why did I say Grail? I wanted Heart and Moon. So this one's a little bit wasted. But we still use the Moon. So Perugian Diaries are what we want. And I don't believe the Secret Thresholds will help me. So I have three of the memories that I need. Confounding Parable will have a Moon, so I'm going to read... I'm trying to remember... I think we're on to Snare of the Tree. Patterns doesn't help. Salt does have Moon, though, so we're on to Deaths of the Moon. Satisfaction has Heart. Red Book of Brittany will be interesting given the flower. Regrets doesn't help. Gossip has Grail. Foresight doesn't help, but Contradictions will. And in theory, I could use the Consider verb for an impulse. But before I do that, we'll use the Hush House key. Okay. I don't know how close that gets me to leveling up Edicts Inviolable, but it doesn't really matter because I don't have any other parts of the house sort of available to read this stuff anyway. So, and it is worth mentioning, so things like Solace and that do appear in a different part of the library now. I've carried a memory like a flambeau safe through the mazes of night. This will complete once dawn has come. Okay, the sunny day doesn't do anything for my current goal, but I'm not ruling it out. And Oriflammes, established 1776, sent Science Sciences. Dear librarian, we would like to offer you this opportunity to purchase 1,000 threads. This one's got to be a crack track book, right? The fate supplications of the matriarch of the well, recorded in darkness by her weavers and her daughters, a 12 Grail Killisimi text. So, seems worth buying. It's expensive, but we have 3 gold spentria. Okay. Mrs. Kill stands ready to help. You always cheer me up, she says morosely. So let's get her leveled up. I think I'm going to talk with her about the spice scales first, and that's just because I may use the spice scales for other things. So proffer a tool, I can lend my assistants something to help increasing their abilities. We're going to wind up using a little bit of everything before too long. And I'd like to unpack the delivery from Cater and Hero, but obviously we have other things to do with the investigate or the consider verb. I do kind of want to see a few more of these further stories. That's one regret I have about the pace at which I get through all of these, but it's definitely... there's still stuff to savor in this one, especially given that I haven't opened all the rooms yet, so... The Hush House key, heavy enough that it takes both hands to turn, heavy enough to brain someone, though you'd need both hands for that too. Serena Blackwood herself forged this key. I'm tired of losing it, she said. And memory sound. A memory lasts longer than an echo. Of course, when speech came into the world, we could cast echoes into words. And we could cast echoes into words. Things got more complicated. Alright, actually I think I will open up the Cater and Hero delivery. I don't think there's anything 30 seconds we can do. Yeah. Open a package. Delivery from Cater and Hero. Something useful has arrived. Unwrap, unbox, unleash. Delivery for me. This tool has boosted their aspects appropriately. Midwife's assistant is somber as autumn, as kind as autumn. She also likes her beer. So we will add the Arab. My pride will find an echo in theirs. Boosts Grail and Edge. Now, one of the options that I have to make this a little bit easier would be something like the Sacrament Callicite, and I'm not opposed to using it. It's just I already had all the other parts in place. So it was easier for me to get exactly what was required as opposed to try and reorganize the day around getting additional Grail aspect, or moving the Grail aspect around. So, the Sun Disfigured, a scroll of Anthropoderm parchment written in the golden ink called Uzalt. The author of the text calls herself the Elegabline. Sometimes she seems to be Sunset Celia, the Watchman's name. Sometimes she seems to be Lady Tryphon, the Grail Long. It is unclear whether these are separate entities or the same person. It may be unclear even to the writer. The flaws in the Sun's plan are elucidated. The Sun's plan itself is never entirely clear, but it is a project of some kind to enter, possess, or surrender to the glory, the pure light above the Mansus. This book suggests ways in which that plan might fail. The Sun's sins and the Sun's scars are our salvation. There are histories where they will trap us, prevent us from rising to eternity. So this isn't for my skill. The account of Kanishk at the Spider's Door. Lok Kahuli, Kanishk's victim and lover, wrote this account, perhaps posthumously. Kanishk sought to become a name. In pursuit of that end, he made Lok Kahuli the vessel of his appetites, promising Lok that they would ascend together. At the Spider's Door, he betrayed his lover. The Chiliarch listened to it happen and then forced Kanishk into his service. The Chiliarch cannot be denied. Lok Kahuli remained to write this work and to describe the outer magics of struggle and contest. Stolen Secret, something I overheard in dreams. So this one I believe is the error. Oh no, this one should be the error because it is a beguiling melody, so we don't have a use for this right now. The Geminiad Volume 3, a fragile manuscript illuminated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty and with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language Fusine is much older. Coral decorates its cover, and its page edges are sharp enough to slash a throat. These pages outline the nature and the doctrines of an hour that demands the union of what has been separated, an hour that is sought at the water's edge and beneath the moon, the witch and sister. The language is elusive, enigmatic, intricate. It will take some untangling. The 3rd volume of the Geminiad reminds us that the witch and sister has been known to manifest as the sister and witch, and that this face may heal while the other face is always hungry. It implies connections between the witch and sister and the Hours of the Wood, especially the secret keeper called the Velvet, but it is ambiguous on whether the witch and sister is a wood hour proper, and it speaks at length about the sadness of the two who are one, the sadness that remains from their time as flesh. The Snare of the Tree, collected proverbs of Aunt Mopsy. Once in the wood we call a visit, twice in the wood we call a journey, thrice we call coming home. Every timber has its knots, the straight and crooked both. Every weave is more absence than thread. You can't keep nowhere out any more than you can keep somewhere in. When the cuckoo learns the nightingale's song, our sleep is sweeter than honey. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The Deaths of the Moon, a historical tract on various forms of survival after death. When the heart no longer beats, the grail may keep the spirit in the body, and an appetite is indicated to sustain. Alukites are the best known, but not the only of this nature. This is the waning moon mode. The full moon mode is the intensification of one element of the soul to the point where ordinary sustention is unstable. Our protector, the generous of hosts, began of this nature, and its generosity remains ungentle. It is possible for the body's health or the heart's core to outpace the other elements, so that a static mode becomes impossible and growth proceeds in dramatic stages until balance remanifests. All right, we've got our pear meringue. I think I'm I believe I'm going to be one memory short. Baked pear meringue. Harvey Haddington, during his convalescence at the house, became obsessed with meringuing techniques. He was known to sneak down into the kitchens and interfere with the cooks in pursuit of this ideal. The Red Book of Brittany, a volume of ink lore gifted to St. Brendan's by Brian of Brittany, who was made Earl of Cornwall after the Norman conquest. The red flower lies heavy, but the roots of the watchman's tree are constant. The red flower is described as the temptation of suffering, but its suffering can apparently be allayed when the copper fruit is enspelled with nectar aspect alongside herbs and infusions techniques. A variant of the same approach, with the inks of power techniques outlined here, can gentle lethe into a great ink. It's perhaps worth noting, of course, that the red and the inks of power, and I do believe the White Book of Brittany does give us the inks of containment. So I really do need to think about how the black flower relates to the Inks of Revelation. I thought I had another book. Yeah, here it is. No, the White Book of Brittany actually gives Ragged Crossroads. Interesting. Should give that a read. And I don't believe in this playthrough I have the Black Book of Brittany yet. The Wainscot Histories, subtitled Stories from Behind the Walls, a miscellany of non-traditional histories, including battles not generally acknowledged and countries which appear on no map, told in a playful, apparently fictional manner. Gore does not mention the Mansus directly, but constant coy metaphorical references to ascending the staircase of years, to the doors of sleep, and to the blue light of dawn suggest he had commerce with the unseen world. It was common in that time to speak of the division of the sun, by which contemporaries understood the eruption of barbarian forces and of their uncouth gods. And the Perugian Diaries. In 1907, at the age of 18, Christopher Lopoli left Strathcoyn's household to study theology at the University of Perugia in Italy, enrolling under the name Christopher Strathcoyn. For 4 years since his adoption from a Bristol orphanage, Lopoli served as Strathcoyn's pupil and protege, but his relationship with this austere and secretive man was always complicated. His journal confides, "I still think Fraser's intentions are good, certainly he agrees, but I never understood the final goal of his investigations. He was never prepared to enlighten me, and good intentions or not, I can no longer bear this dream of eyes. We have agreed to part, almost amicably." Alompoli left Perugia in 1909 without completing his degree. He had long lost interest in his studies, and the latter half of the journal is concerned with his studies of Umbrian folk songs and notes towards his own compositions, which are of widely varying quality. One of the better ones, In the Marshes of Night, suggests he visited the site of Old Lake Fucinus near Ortuccio. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, but I only need 8, so why did I think 9? And we'll just give this 0.1 seconds. All right. So we first of all have the order form from Cater and Hero. We have... So I'm going to divide this up. So one of these is going to get turned into a pot of tea. If I can find a place to put it. I guess I technically already have an Evening Isles coffee sitting around, as I do a Dawn Lion coffee. And now we'll find a place to store these. So we do have a little space in the pantry now. Let's see if I can make this work. So I can take the honey and put it on the shelf here. The onion rings can go... Okay, let's move the sugar. Onion rings can go here. Move the scrumpy down. Almonds can move to the almond shelf. Yorkshire pudding, eggy, creamy, crispy, and the eternal supporting character in a Sunday roast. To the similarly eternal confusion of English speakers who are not British, Yorkshire pudding is not sweet and cannot be served for the pudding course. Don't really want to mess with the placement of the prepared food. Let me move this one up here, though. Okay, this gives us a start. No! Almost. All right. So, let's... Before I go too much further, let's just get the Edicts Inviolable out of the way. All right, there is always more to learn. Improve the skill to level 9. Okay. Pentamids and precursors is not that big of a challenge to get leveled up, so we're going to do that now. And in fact, we already have the Beguiling Melody, so that gives us a head start. So I just need another Grail, or 2 more Grail or Scale. Well, the Hindsight will give me the Scale, and this gives me a chance to read the White Book of Brittany, which oddly enough, I believe was already on the next on the list, because we'd read the Hissing Key. And then we can read the Red Book of Brittany. I'm going to just take a second here and double check that I don't have the Black Book of Brittany, but I'm going to guess that's too much to hope for. That was worth checking. Okay, so that's the 3 that I need for the wolf stories for Pentiments and Precursors, so we're good there. And I think I said that I was going to level up Rites of the Roots with the Moth, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to take a second here, and I have a number of different skills that I want to level up, but I haven't actually worked out what they need, so I think now would be a good time for me to just clarify that. So Rites of the Roots, Nectar, and Moth. Furs and Feathers, I believe, are Sky and Scale. Edicts Inviolable won't matter. Sacra Solis Invicti, I believe, is Sky and Lantern. Anbury and Lapidary should be Sky and Forge. Solutions and Separations, I think, is Knock and Moth. Yeah. Purifications and Exaltations should be another Sky and Lantern. Orchids and Nectars is Nectar and Grail. Serpents and Venoms I always get wrong. I think it's Scale and... no, Moon. And then we just said Pentiments and Precursors. Okay, so out of the stuff, I guess technically what I should be looking at would be the Knock and the Moth. So I'm actually slightly inclined towards putting the effort into Purifications and Solutions and Separations. It's a long journey, but it's one I should probably get done. I have talked previously about how Ragged Crossroads doesn't have an obvious... so it's Edge and Winter, right? So just to recap, Rites of the Roots, Nectar and Moth, Furs and Feathers, Sky and Scale. Edicts Inviolable was Heart and Moon. Sacra Solis Invicti, Sky and Lantern. Anbury and Lapidary, Sky and Forge. Sky and Lantern for Purifications and Exaltations. Solutions and Separations, Knock and Moth. Orchids and Narcotics, Nectar and Grail. Serpents and Venoms, Scale, and... wait. Moth? Moon. Pentiments and Precursors, Scale, and Grail. So no Winter, no Edge. And that's actually going to be kind of interesting, just because this is not the only case where I'm going to have the Winter and the Edge to work with. Now that's fine. I'll just level up, whatever seems interesting. But it's also kind of a nice problem to have. What I want to try and do is lock in the lessons that I want to lock in the lessons that I already I've already got a plan for. And then if I have a surplus, make sure that I have sort of a surplus for sorry, I'm stumbling over this. I want to make sure that, if I have a surplus of skills, I have a plan for where I place them. So obviously priority goes to things with, Winter and Edge when I have that surplus of Winter and Edge. But I actually want a game plan for that. And then for Magaphine Mysteries, I think we'll probably throw that into Serpents and Venoms. But anyways, let's work on the current plan. So we had our... let me make sure I got that. So, White Book of Brittany, Red Book of Brittany, and we've got the Beguiling Melody. So we're good to go for the... we're good to go for Pentiments and Precursors. If, after all of that sort of hemming and hawing, I think we're going to put the points into